Okay, so this topic is really, it's kind of challenging to do with a computer program. Typically, we want to kind of see the work and the steps. And so this is kind of the best we got here. So it can get a little frustrating, but we're going to try to show that the left side is equivalent to the right side. And so they're trying to kind of help us out by showing what um, what you're going to use to change these out, to substitute them out using your identities. And so right here, the denominator is tangent squared. And so they give you this one, but you have to notice that you have to solve for tangent first. So you would subtract 1 from both sides to get started. So then tangent squared is equivalent to secant squared minus 1. So that's what goes right there. Then the next step, they're showing you that secant is equivalent to 1 over cosine. But on this property, you can't do this with all properties, but like this one up here, if they weren't squared, this would not hold up here. This property up here, they have to be squared, okay? But on this other property here, you could change this to whatever powers you want. So you could change that to secant squared, and then that just has to be cosine squared right there. So what we're doing is we're going to replace the secant squared right here with 1 over cosine squared. Okay, so that's what they replace right there. And then you still have the minus 1, and then you still have your numerator from up here. So nothing's changed with the numerator so far. Then the next step, I guess they're probably going to give you a couple of different options. And so right here it says rewrite using the least common denominator. So what you would do here is you would change out this minus 1 right here to cosine squared over cosine squared. And so when you do that, now you have a common denominator, and that's how we get 1 minus cosine squared all over cosine squared. Then the last step right here, what we're going to do is we're going to do, I like to call it keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip. So you keep the numerator as cosine theta plus 1. You change it to, oh wait, let me see. Maybe they're doing something different here. I would do keep, change, flip. Let's see. Let me see. Let me scroll up here for a second. Okay, so that the keep, change, flip is what they're going to do. I think maybe they're just drawing it out into a couple extra steps. But what we'll do here is we'll have cosine of theta plus 1. I'll put that over 1. And then we're going to change it to multiplication. And then you've got to flip your denominator right here. And so that's going to be cosine of theta squared all over 1 minus cosine of theta squared. Now what you have down here in your denominator spot is you actually have the difference of 2 squares, because I could put that as a 1 squared right there. So what we're going to end up with on top is we've got cosine of theta plus 1. I'm just going to leave that by itself for right now, times cosine of theta squared. Now, in the denominator spot, we'll do the difference of 2 squares. So 1 plus cosine of theta and 1 minus cosine of theta. And if you were to FOIL that together, it would go right back there. But then what we can do here is this is going to cancel out here and here. Okay, so then we're left with cosine squared over 1 minus cosine of theta. Okay, so this is where it gets a little interesting here, and your algebra, you got to be a little creative here. So what I'm going to do on bottom, so let's see, we're left with cosine of theta squared over, what I'm going to do on bottom, I'm actually going to factor out a cosine. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to have a cosine of theta here, and let me see. Okay, sorry, my pen was going a little screwy on me. Okay, so we're going to factor that out, and that's going to leave me, oh, still not writing. Let me see. There we go. Okay, that'll leave me with 1 over cosine of theta, and then that'll give me a minus 1 right there. Okay, so like I said, this is kind of interesting on what I did here. And, to be honest, it just takes a lot of practice and playing around with these. These are probably the hardest part of this course. So see, if I were to multiply this back in, it would go back up to what I had right here, because cosine over cosine would reduce to a 1, and then I have minus, and then that 1 would be my cosine of theta right there. Now what this is going to allow me to do here is I can cancel out one of the cosines on top, so that will reduce that down to where there's only one of them, and I can cancel that with this one. So I'm left with cosine of theta on top, and then on bottom, 1 over cosine of theta transforms into the secant of theta minus 1. Right there I have the minus 1. And there we go, and I believe that should match what we have on the right side. So yeah, that was a tough one, and like I said, the computers don't really make it all that much easier. I mean, it can sometimes be helpful to give you an idea of what identity you're supposed to be using, but this is just one of those things that takes a lot of time, and it just takes a lot of practice. So anyways, I hope this does help somewhat.